Welcome. My name is Dr. Cindy Moss. I'm the VP of STEM and Innovation for Defined Learning, and we'll get started here in just a minute. We'll give people a minute or two to come in. And Lisa, you may have to let them in.
Okay.
And we'll wait maybe like 2 minutes and then get started.
Great.
Hello, strangers.
Welcome, Brandon Kinney. We're glad you're joining us today. And if you're joining us, if you would tell us in the chat where you're from, your position, any questions you have right away, that would be good. My neighbor is getting a new roof, so I apologize if you're hearing the sounds of the hammers on the roof next door.
Can't hear anything.
Okay, good. That's good to know. All right, maybe we should just go ahead and get started since we're recording it, Lisa.
Yeah, that's great.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about partnering with Defined Learning to prepare students in Iowa for the future. And the three of us are going to be speaking with you today. I've told you I'm Dr. Cindy Moss. We have Bill Allen, who's a high school science and robotics teacher from Central Lyon, and Jordan Minning, who's the Future Ready coordinator from Northwest AEA. I'm just going to start and talk a little bit about project-based learning in case it's not something that you already do. What project-based learning does is it creates this culture where every kid gets to be a problem solver. They work on the skills that they need to be successful in the future, and they get to do it with the facilitation of their teacher and the assistance of their peers. When you're doing project-based learning, you're learning about jobs. It's career connected. The kids are solving problems from the real world. They're finding out about the kind of skills you need to take on a job. And it's very inspiring and motivating for all types of learners because there's lots of pathways for mastery. But for us, in terms of being educators working with these students, I feel like it's about preparing them for the problem solving they'll need in the future. We want all kids to know that they can do this, including our girls. Many times we find girls believe they can do math and science until about 6th grade. And if you don't believe you can do math and science by 6th grade, the National Science Foundation says you never will. So we need to make sure that all of our students, no matter their skin color or their gender, realize they can be a problem solver. And why should this matter to your students? When you're talking about jobs, they always want to know how much you make, what it takes to be in that job, what do you do? But we want them to know that they can be developing these skills in K-12 so they're ready for those jobs. I like to use this phrase from Marian Wright Edelman. She was the lady who started the Children's Defense Fund. You can't be what you can't see. And I feel like it's our moral obligation in K-12 education to show our students that all students, no matter where they are, can develop these problem-solving skills, get a good job, and make the world a better place. Now, I know you can be very philosophical like me, but your superintendent's going to say, what about those reading, math, and science scores? And I was the director of STEM in Charlotte for 145,000 kids, and we'd look at the data, we'd disaggregate the data, we'd clean up the data. And I know that poverty matters. If a kid is ADD or ADHD, it matters. If they don't speak English, they can't read, all of these things matter. But after a while, I started to get mad. And what I believed as an educator and a leader was that this achievement gap is really an opportunity gap. And that's what we believe at Defined Learning. And we want to help you as educators find a way to overcome that opportunity gap. That means every teacher in your school needs to provide learning opportunities where kids become problem solvers, no matter what they teach. We need to go from this kind of teaching, which is traditional, where we keep, each of us stays in our paint bucket and keeps every drop of paint in our bucket, and prepare our kids more for this kind of world in which they find themselves. To do this, we need to be doing hands-on inquiry, cyber inquiry. We need to give kids real-world connections. I like to say our students have great fake meters. They know the difference between a real-world problem and a problem on page 77 at the end of chapter 3. And we as adults have created so many real-world problems. We need to honor our students enough to give them those problems and see what they can do to solve them. We need to link them to careers so they start thinking about their future. And there's never enough time in the day. When I visit schools, particularly elementary schools, I always get a kick out of looking at the schedule on the side of their door. It will say, math 90 minutes, English 90 minutes, literacy 90 minutes, whatever it says. I can do the math. I can add it up. There's always more minutes on the schedule on the side of the door than there are in the day. When we're doing project-based learning, kids are using reading, math, science, social studies, and the arts to solve their problems. They're learning deeply, they're learning quickly, and they'll be able to apply it. They're also developing these essential skills of communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking that employers desperately need. We know project-based learning is the right way to do this. It's actually a force for educational equity. In Charlotte, I had 14,000 teachers, and most of them, I think, really cared and wanted to do the right thing, but their abilities were variable at best. The good thing about PBL is all kids can do it. They actually love it. They want to do it, no matter whether they're a struggling student or a gifted student. It's transformative. Students learn what their skills really are. Many times our special ed kids, they have great problem solving skills because they live in a world that's not created for them. And so when they start doing project-based learning, it's good for them to see their skills translate and for other students to see they can appreciate those skills in those special needs learners. It aligns with culturally responsive teaching. It gives kids opportunities to choose things that matter to them, and it's authentic. It gives kids the opportunity to see what's going on in the world around them and to start thinking about their future and how their skills will apply to it. I know we have to get kids to read, but many times in our schools, we look at kids in first and second grade. If we think they're going to score poorly on the third grade test, we take away science and social studies and the arts, things that make life worth living, to get them reading. And instead, we need to teach them, give them a reason to read. We need to give them problems to solve that will get them excited about reading to learn how to solve the problem. We need to teach them how to collaborate so they can share what they've learned, their skills can improve, and they're really working the way that businesses of today and tomorrow need their employees to work. We need to give them experiences. In the summertime when you travel, you know how you'll never forget the geography of a certain area. You remember what the food tastes like, what the music sounds like, because you've been there. So let's give kids experiences whenever we can. And when we can't, let's use technology to bring those experiences to them. And we need to integrate the arts. For many of our students, the arts are their passion, and the arts need to be an avenue for success and not just the icing that's on top of the solution that they create. It needs to be integrated into everything that they do and become a means of communication. We need to give them time. So many times as educators, we need to take out some of the standards and go deeper in a fewer number of standards so that our students have these eureka moments and get excited about the possibilities of learning. We know that project-based learning gives kids the opportunity to have deeper learning. They apply things in context. And project-based learning was started in the 1950s by schools of engineering and medical schools because we want doctors to graduate from medical school knowing how to apply their skills. And we want an engineer who's supposed to build a bridge to have been able to apply it instead of just learn about it in a textbook. That's what we can provide for our students K-12. We know from research that when you're doing this, kids are developing those higher order thinking and problem solving skills, and those multiple choice tests will take care of themselves. We also know that we want our students to be excited. In the summer when they go to camp, they don't want to go home at the end of the day and they can't wait to come back the next day. If you're doing project-based learning in your class, the same thing will happen. We also know when you're doing project-based learning, kids are developing persistence. And we want them to understand that most problems we're solving, you don't get right the first time. And as long as you learn something, it's not a failure. It's your first attempt in learning. This picture is to remind me to tell you that project-based learning aligns with what the National Science Foundation says. The more diverse the group solving a problem, the more robust the solution. To solve the problems we've created in our states and country and world, we need the best thinking of all of our students, and PBL is how we get them there. This is also to remind us that project-based learning puts the fun back in fundamentals. In my opinion, the last 20 years, we've sucked the joy out of school for kids and teachers, and we need to put it back, not just because it will improve attendance, kids will want to be at school, teachers will want to be at school, but the brain research says if you're trying to form a new neural pathway to shoot a free throw, play the piano, solve a algorithm in math, you need to get it correct 28 times over 3 weeks. The only time it's different is if you're having fun. And if you're having fun, you get a new neural pathway after you do something correctly 3 times. So to get our students to where they need to be, fun is critically important. And what I'm going to do now is turn this over to my friends here to talk about how they're doing this in Iowa so that you can see what project-based learning has to do with the right way to teach our students in Iowa. So Jordan, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Cindy. It's awesome stuff that you're sharing. So I'm just going to give a little context around what we're doing at the Northwest AEA, how that's relating to why we support defined learning, the implementation, what's happening. Bill's going to share here in a minute, really get you into the classroom and understanding what he has done. So when I talk about our future ready work, what we're doing here, it really wraps around these 3 areas of life. Cindy talked a lot about what does that look like with those skills, making sure students are prepared. We also want to remember those academics, probably in education. A lot of times right now or in the past, we've been very academic heavy in the last probably 10 years, a huge focus on those academic pieces, right? But we want to make sure that academics there and then tied to the career connections. And you'll see in defined learning, they have those career connections all the way from elementary, middle school, high school. So that is really the focus when we're talking about future ready, tying those 3 together. So when we think about that, there's 2 questions that we often consider whenever we're looking at anything that we're doing with Future Ready. And so how does it connect to our focus in Iowa around Future Ready and work-based learning? Work-based learning is a huge push and really a big focus in Iowa. And we can see in defined learning, and I'll let Bill talk about his experiences, and I'll connect some of those back to the future ready work that we're doing. And then looking at how does that help set students up for success in work-based learning. The other thing Dr. Moss talked about was the benefit, right? And making sure school is fun for students and teachers. And so that's something we look at when we're looking at programs is how's it going to not benefit just the students, but how's it going to also benefit the teachers? And I think Bill will be able to elaborate on that a little bit too, from his experience of implementing the benefit that it's had for him, but also for his students as well. So we look at those 2 questions often whenever we're evaluating or anything, and we found really good success with defined learning, being able to connect to our future ready work and what the schools really want and that type of learning that Dr. Moss just talked about, but also then what is the benefit for the educators, right? And there's a dual purpose there. It's really helpful with the educators being able to create some opportunities and get students thinking about opportunities that they maybe didn't have before. So with that, there's 2 areas with you'll see here, our future ready core beliefs. And just to reemphasize this, and I'm going to turn it over to Bill here, but I highlighted 5 and 6. All students need opportunities to engage in a variety of career options to build understanding of their values and strengths in order to reach their goals and potential. Again, really aligning with what was just talked about. And then 6, the need for to acquire those skills for students to be future ready, whether they're in elementary, whether they're in middle school or high school. How can we help them be successful right now and in the future, whichever pathway they choose? So it just all aligns really well to that. And I'm guessing you have similar pieces that you're focused on in your school and your buildings. And again, we'll see some of that, how that's been played out in the classroom with Mr. Allen here. So I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Allen, thinking about how he got started with Defined and that role.
Yeah, so I guess the reason for me getting involved with Defined learning stemmed from I teach an environmental science class that is taken by most students as their 3rd year of science in high school, where they need that 3rd year to graduate, but maybe they didn't want to take chemistry or they're not necessarily thinking 4-year post-secondary or something like that. So what I ended up with in that class was a wide range of students. I had students that just wanted to be there because they needed their 3rd year of science, all the way up to the students that were really interested in environmental science and took the class because they wanted to be there based on the curriculum. So I had a wide range, and I was having trouble with student engagement. Students in our school are, you know, pretty polite. They're Northwest Iowa. They're, you know, they'll do what you ask them to do, but maybe that doesn't always necessarily mean that they're engaged. And so I decided to give defined learning a chance to help me with that engagement. Some of the things that I started seeing right away is some of those kids that were just taking it as a third year of science were jumping into these projects because we were talking about using a bunch of 2x6s to build some raised bed gardens. Well, now they're interested because they're spending part of their day down in the shop where they'd rather be than my classroom anyways. And now they're going to take some of that and bring it into my classroom and talk about something that's quote unquote science related. So I think that with the different projects that you have available to you, the resources in defined learning can help get some of those kids who maybe weren't engaged all of a sudden interested in the project. I was really worried. I still wanted students to be able to, you know, do well on that multiple choice test that Dr. Moss was talking about earlier. I didn't want to give up on that. I wanted to be able to make sure that they could still score well. So I kind of did it at first, kind of got into it slowly. And then as I started to believe in the system more and more, last year, I got to the point in environmental science where I was using defined STEM and performance-based assessments more than I ever had. I got really, really curious as to, okay, are they still scoring as well as I think they're scoring? And so I decided to give them the ultimate test. Last year, at the end of the year, I also teach AP environmental science as well. I decided to take one of those AP practice exams from one of those 5 steps to getting a 5 on the exam. And I gave it to my regular environmental science class at the end of the year. And I ended up having something like 32% of them actually would have scored a 3 on the exam had they sat for the exam last May. And so I think at that point, there was no denying it. If you get the kids engaged, they're going to better understand the material than had you just stuck with the traditional, you know, classroom lecture and take a test at the end of the chapter type format. I guess one of the other things I did want to make sure that I added is I know I was naive when I first started teaching, but I really thought I was going to walk into a science classroom and every kid that walked into my room was going to be as excited about science as I was. And it was kind of a shock to me when I started to realize, you know what, 90% of the kids don't want to be here. And they not only don't want to be here, they're not going to do this at the next level like I did. And so I had to figure out a way to get that information applicable to their lives, as well as that, say, 10% that wanted to go on and major in science. And I think project-based learning and defined learning, that can actually help you do that with that other 90% of the kids.
So Bill, why don't you talk a little bit about your start, your hesitation of getting in, found some evidence of, hey, this actually is working. I know we've shared a few stories of that hesitancy on like, Jordan, really, should I do this? Is it really worth it? But talk a little bit too about some of the things that you've done, the application that you've seen. You'll see here some of the projects on the screen that he has done as well with students.
Yeah, I guess some of the my original hesitation came down to I'm 50 years old and I grew up and I did well in a setting where I studied the material for a chapter and then I regurgitated the information back to my teacher and my teacher patted me on the back and I went on about my day. I felt like that had to be like I couldn't give up on that. And how would I know if I had the kids do one of these projects? How would I know that they had learned what I intended them to learn? It became easier and easier to see when you started walking around and having conversations with these kids that they were going past the vocabulary. The vocabulary was embedded in what they were telling me. And so I knew that they understood the vocabulary, but they were actually, you know, making the connection with the vocabulary to their particular project that they had kind of made their own. I guess my baby, the one I go back to every single year, the one that I look forward to the most is the rooftop farming project, because we live here in rural Iowa. And for the life of these kids, they would never understand why anybody would want to go up onto a roof and actually plant a garden. And so that helps us make connections to urban areas where some of our kids maybe haven't, been able to experience that as much as others. And so we use that as a great learning tool, since a lot of our kids are strong in agricultural based, applications anyways, just because of where we live, but then taking that and transferring that to, what might be going on in an urban type setting. We can tie that into economics. If you're not interested in saving the environment, that's one thing. That's okay. That's your prerogative. But if we can help you make money at something, then okay, maybe now all of a sudden I'm interested. We should all be interested in saving the earth and saving the environment. I understand that, but some of us are more bought into it than others. If you can give students a reason to do it that might be pragmatic or might be economically based, then they might be more interested in entertaining the idea. And I think these projects can actually help you do that with students.
So you talked a little bit too about the application, and you had what you were doing previously, some text that they were studying, and then you found some application that was a little more interesting or you thought was applicable to the students. Dr. Moss, if you want to go to the next slide, I think there's some pictures here thinking about that and some excitement Bill had of thinking, hey, some of these applications I think our students can connect with compared to maybe what they were thinking about before.
Yeah, so as endangered species and reintroduction into their natural environment. I think the Defined Learning project actually talks about the Bengal tiger, and we took that and we kind of ran with it and decided, well, maybe the tiger isn't everyone's animal that they want to study. And so, but the Defined Learning let us do that. It gave us the resources that we needed to go ahead and let students research, find an endangered species, find out why it was endangered, figure out, okay, are there ways that we can go ahead and help reintroduce this animal back into a natural setting? And that just takes you off on, I don't know how many different essential learnings within environmental science with that one project. We can talk about, saving the species versus the ecosystem. We can talk about, how much money does it cost to save a California condor from extinction, and then talk about, endemic species in different areas. I guess to use the term, you're hitting so many different areas within the same project that you don't have to worry about not having enough time at the end of the year to make sure that you get everything covered. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay.
Bill, I just wanted to ask you, I know you said you hesitated a little bit. How difficult was it to start using these projects? If you're speaking to other educators who are on the webinar.
Not nearly as difficult as you make it appear in your mind before you actually jump in and try. Honestly, if you give the kids the freedom to create, they almost take over for you. And we all get told, we've got to differentiate for the students. What do we do with the students that have already learned and compared to the students that haven't learned yet? These projects are tailor-made for differentiation. I can push this student a little bit further in their group because maybe they've already got all the essential learnings met, whereas I can also take the exact same class period to work with students that maybe haven't quite caught on yet. Our IEP students love them. Our 504 plan students love them. Our high-end students love them. It's just they don't ever get tired of being able to take a topic, make it their own, and come up with their own project.
And will you tell the participants what kind of resources does Defined provide for you, or were you spending all your time finding everything yourself?
That's what makes it so simple. I mean, the one thing teachers cannot find more of is time. We've got a finite amount of time and we have to prep for however many preps we have to go to. Defined STEM has all the resources right there for you. And I can say this too, especially with some of the projects I've used more than once, they're always being updated. And so you don't have to worry about finding dated resources, which is an issue in environmental science. Sometimes that data can become not as useful very, very quickly. They're always updating. And in fact, Jordan and I were going through some stuff this week, and I had noticed where they had updated some stuff since the last time I had been there. So they're always updating it. You can count on them to have viable sources that are actually going to matter and that the kids are going to use in the project. And that's what makes it great.
Yeah.
I never mentioned this. This is one of my favorite parts about the Defined Learning. it's at the end of each project, you've got this final reflection assignment that you can have the students complete. And this is one of the assignments when I first started doing it that I thought the kids were just going to jump through the hoop. They're going to get the 6 questions answered, and then they're just going to go ahead and hit submit, and then it's going to be done and on to the next thing. The final reflection assignments and the answers that I get, that's where it proves to me that the students are doing the learning. That's where they're hitting on, okay, I understood this and this and this and this. I wish I was a little bit stronger when it came to this. And then, oh, by the way, Mr. Allen, I wish you would have asked me about this because I was really proud of this and you never took the time to ask me about this. And so the final reflection, I think, is what kind of put the final nail in the coffin for me. It's like this is that data. This is that proof that I needed to have to know that the students are learning what we expect them to learn.
Awesome. Do you have questions or anything? I can talk a little bit about the scope and implementation of things that we've worked with schools, but specifically any questions before we move on to this section here? Otherwise we can.
Bill, I just wanted to ask you, are there any specific hands-on materials or anything else that you had to collect, or were you able to use materials that you typically have in your classroom when you're doing these PBLs?
Oh, I don't remember ever having to go out and find stuff on my own. I'm not saying that I didn't make each project my own and maybe supplement stuff that I had been using in the past, but I don't ever feel like I started on a project and thought, okay, something is like really missing. And so I've got to go out and spend my own time trying to figure out what that would be. So I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yes, no, that's good. Thank you. Some people think if they're doing PBL, it means they're going to have to spend a whole lot of money and a whole lot of time. I just wanted to hear your perspective on that.
Absolutely. Awesome. Anything else? So when we look at this, the scope of defined learning, what we offer right in the Northwest AEA region, what defined learning has to offer, Bill is a perfect example of showing like how the whole project is done, right? Defined learning has offered PBLs that are well built, but there's options. We've had lots of educators talk about, hey, I love these career videos that are connected to the learning I'm doing. I can embed this into my unit, or, oh, I really like this driving question, or some of these resources, right? So when it's intimidating to look at, oh, this is a whole new type of learning for me, or a whole new type of way of teaching, we've seen lots of educators use it in different ways as well, which has been really exciting, right? So as Bill talked about, he can make this project more of his own as he wants. You can go in and you can edit just about anything in the project that you want to, if there's something you want to add or take out. And so that scope, as we look at, if you want to go to the next slide, Cindy, you talk about the launch. Some educators use this as just launching in, oh, I found this idea, rooftop garden. I would have never thought about teaching my kids about this or exposing it to them. Some educators may use it as just an idea or a creation to get going, right? So there's lots of different ways that you can use it. Schools are also looking, you'll see portrait of a graduate on the next slide. We have schools doing that work, profile of a graduate, whatever you want to call it, or whichever you're using, but aligning to those skills. We talked about that. Bill shared that experience with him as well. Here's just an example. And schools are really looking at how can we align to what we believe and what we value in our system. And that really helps us with defined learning, saying, hey, this is a resource for educators and students that aligns to the work that we're doing and what we believe and what the skills and experiences we want students to explore and be able to have access to. So with that, the last one here shows some contact information as well. If you're in the Northwest AEA region, for myself, if you haven't used defined learning, you can certainly reach out to myself. Lisa is on there as well, and we'll share her contact info in a minute as well, specifically in how she can help support you. Dr. Moss is on there. Bill is on there. If you want to reach out directly to him to talk about it, getting started, or just what you can do together to better educate students and provide them amazing learning opportunities. So that link on the bottom also is a getting started link that you can go to as well. All right, Cindy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. And I know we had Bill, who's an amazing high school teacher, but defined learning is K-12, and we have many very successful elementary and middle school teachers. If you're interested in that, we can connect you to one of those to talk about how it works for them. Where do we go next? we would love to help more schools in Iowa, more teachers figure out how to provide this kind of learning so that we're engaging all of our students and they're really ready to take on the world in the future. If you have questions or comments, I've been trying to monitor the chat. I haven't really seen anything, but Lisa Stanton, she handles our accounts in Iowa, and her email is Lisa_Stanton. It's kind of hard to see it. It underlines it and it gets rid of that underscore between her name. And that's her phone number. She would love to talk to you, set up a time to give you a demo, figure out what kind of issues you're facing and how we can partner with you to take your education to the next level. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Good luck as you go forward with your school year. And we look forward to figuring out how we can work with you in the future. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Jordan. Thanks, Bill, and Cindy too.